Is there a right to freedom of speech, and if so, what are its limits? As I interpret this question, it asks whether a person may permissibly respond to a speaker or writer with threats of harm or actual harm. This includes the threat of government penalties such as fines or imprisonment or execution. It also applies to certain forms of private retaliation, costs that aim to make people fearful of saying what they believe. There's a right to do something if there are reasons to condemn people who respond to those who do it in certain harmful ways. For reasons that John Stuart Mill provided, there should be a strong presumption to discourage people from responding to words with public or private retaliation. People can still respond with words explaining why the speaker or writer's assertions are incorrect, but not with retaliation. Reason number 1. The claims that one is responding to might be true, and the retaliatory response inhibits society's ability to harvest the benefits of that truth. Reason number 2. Even if the belief that one is attacking is false, one can't understand one's own true belief unless one can understand how to respond to the words said against it, with evidence and with reason. Now, a third reason that Mill provided says that true beliefs that are not challenged become dead dogma. They don't have a lively effect on one's actions. Actually, I don't know if this one's true. Mill provided the example of Christians who accept certain principles, such as do unto others as you would have them do unto you, who do not live according to these principles. However, I don't know if it's because they do not allow others to actively challenge those principles. Another explanation can be found in the thesis by David Hume that beliefs simply don't motivate actions. It's desire that motivates actions, and vigorously challenging the truth of a belief need not have any impact at all on an agent's desires. So I want to toss out this reason and insert a different reason 3. Reason number 3. A lack of practice in defending a belief leaves people vulnerable to weak arguments when they break through the protections of censorship. If you teach people, here's an objection to that position and here are the reasons to reject that objection, they're in a much better position to respond to critics than the person who's taught, here's a position, remember it, if you hear anybody raising questions about it, report them to the authorities. Mill actually went further. Yes, it's useful to learn how to defend true beliefs from those who might raise questions, but it's far more useful to learn how to defend true beliefs from people who actually raise questions. In any contest, like football or chess, learning how to defeat sparring partners on a practice field is useful. Engaging in actual contest against opponents determined to win is much more useful. Reason number 4. The threat of punishing people for what they say or do will discourage timid people from asking any questions at all, and then society loses the benefit of any contributions that those individuals would have made. Reason number 5. One has a moral obligation to consider an idea from all sides before acting on it, particularly when those actions risk the well-being of others. Even the most horrible of defendants has a right to a fair trial, and is even provided with a professional advocate to make the strongest possible case. The idea being that one is not justified in inflicting the harms of punishment on a person without providing them with this opportunity. Similarly, a responsible person taking a position on any public issue, from the minimum wage to climate change to closing schools during an epidemic, has an obligation to discover all that can be said against their position. Of course, that requires that people be permitted to speak against their position. This responsibility entails giving others a right to freedom of speech. But there are certain words or expressions where we do allow for retaliation. We allow for retaliation in the form of criminal penalties against those who lie under oath. The benefits of allowing people to speak freely do not deny the legitimacy of threatening those who lie under oath with jail time. The benefits we harvest from allowing people to think and speak freely about unpopular ideas also don't apply to lies told about a person that cause substantial harm. Of course, it's important to note that here, too, a retaliatory response is authorized with claims that are false, or at the very least, where there's no support for them being true. Other examples of speech where a retaliatory response is permissible includes revealing certain government secrets, false advertising of certain products, particularly in the field of medicine, and false promises in the forms of contracts that one has no intention to uphold. All of this aims to illustrate that there are areas where we have little reason to condemn and perhaps some reason to praise those who respond to some types of speech with retaliation. Okay, what about hate speech? There are significant problems, significant potential harms with speech that establishes what C. Ty Nguyen identified as echo chambers. Nguyen defined an echo chamber as an epistemic system that creates a barrier of trust between those who hold an idea and those who would criticize it. As a result of this barrier of distrust, those who would bring up objections to the beliefs held within the echo chamber can't get through to the people on the inside. The people on the inside dismiss any criticism as manipulative deception. In the video in which I discussed this problem, I used as an example the situation that Jews face, particularly in Europe and America in the 1920s and 1930s. Henry Ford promoted an anti-Jewish conspiracy theory and discredited those who would point out his errors as being under the influence of those same Jews. Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels used the same practices to gain power for the Nazi Party in Germany. As Nazi Germany demonstrates, this type of speech can bring down democratic governments and lead to horrendous crimes being committed against a target population. And Hitler gained power in a country with freedom of speech. If the claim is that freedom of speech will protect us from these horrors, history shows that this claim is false. Nazi Germany was not an exception. These types of hate movements have taken over societies in the past, leading to many of the worst atrocities in human history: crusades, jihads, inquisitions, genocides, wars of conquest, and slavery. The worst events of human history involve the effects of these types of echo chambers. Given the significant levels of harm that they produce, and given the fact that by their very nature echo chambers are substantially immune to the effects of good words, an argument can be made to respond to this type of speech with something other than words. Now, a common objection to this type of proposal would ask where to draw the line between hate speech that one responds to with sanctions of some sort and other types of speech that can be permitted. That's a serious question. It shouldn't be easily dismissed. But one should note that perjury and libel and slander face the same question. So even though this is a legitimate concern, it isn't a knockdown argument against the practice. If we were to draw a line, I would trace the line that defines libel and slander. I would describe hate speech as deliberately or demonstrably false claims that function to cause harm to a group as opposed to an individual. Another issue relevant to free speech isn't about responding to words with retaliation. It's about preventing a substantial but largely unrecognized form of censorship, crowding out. Imagine that a town has called a town meeting to discuss a zoning change. The city council has set aside 2 hours for public debate. A representative that wants some residential land zoned as commercial for a shopping mall is speaking and just keeps talking and talking. It's not censorship to tell this person to shut up, sit down, and let somebody else have a turn. The same can be said of wealthy individuals and corporations that spend huge amounts of money and fill the communication space with material promoting their side of an issue, all that they can reach with their advertising dollars. And advertising expenditure isn't the only way that somebody with money can fill the communication space. Any good public relations firm will have a contact list filled with people who will be happy to talk about this or that subject. The PR executive places a few phone calls And the next thing you know, talking heads and pundits are spreading the message across the airwaves. And just to make sure that the communication is effective, the wealthy contributor commissioned some surveys and focus groups to determine just how to state the position for maximum effect. They can make sure that it shows up in front of people who will like and share and endorse it. And those who would point out any mistakes and misrepresentations never see it. All of this well-financed public noise has the effect of crowding out and thereby silencing other voices. In the interest of fair and open debate, there's nothing wrong with telling the people filling up the communication space with noise to sit down, shut up, and let somebody else have a turn. Yes, the right to freedom of speech is an important right. There should be a strong presumption in its favor. But it's already a presumption that can be outweighed in cases of perjury, libel, slander, false promises, false medical claims, revealing state secrets, and the like. Establishing echo chambers built on claims of hatred towards some target group may fit into that same category. As for telling wealthy donors to shut up, sit down, and let somebody else speak, that isn't even censorship. That's giving people an opportunity to speak.